everyone, and thanks for listening to the Quality Hub, chatting with ISO experts. I'm your host, Xavier Francis, and today I'm here with Stuart Kelly, Chief Commercial Officer at LRQA, and Kevin Franklin, LRQA's Chief Product Officer. Glad to talk with you gentlemen today. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thanks, X.
And today's topic is transition talks. What's changing in ISO standards? But before we dive into this, let's first learn a little bit about our guest. Let's start with Kevin. Can you give me a little bit of history about yourself?
Thanks, X. Yeah, my name's Kevin Franklin. I'm the Chief Product Officer for LRQA. And actually, this topic's particularly close to my heart. It's very timely as well, given that that's the kind of date of the last refresh. Anyway, very much looking forward to this conversation together.
Awesome. Well, thank you for being here. And Stuart, how about you?
Yeah, again, great to be here. So Stuart Kelly, I'm Chief Commercial Officer for LRQA, and I'm particularly excited in this subject, quite sadly, because I probably started my professional career just as the first ISO standard that was published and came into play with 9001. So I've kind of been here through the inception and actually seeing it mature into a living and breathing way of working for a number of businesses around the world. So, and I'm working with a lot of global clients now on their supply chain assurance programs and then their quality management programs to ensure that their risk is managed and that their brand is protected. So all of these changes are very relevant, and I think they also show a change in direction in terms of the world and what it's looking for from businesses in terms of their moral compass and their legal requirements. So great to have the conversation and see where we go.
Yeah, I was reviewing some of the changes that are coming, and it does seem like it's aligning a little bit more with what's going on in the world. It's just kind of evolving into the next step. Well, we are at the start of one of the most significant shifts in the ISO standards. It's been nearly a decade for most of these standards, so a lot of time in between. Kevin, what is behind this wave of updates?
It's a great question, X. I think firstly, as you pointed out, these updates reflect a conscious shift really towards an update and a view of the ISO frameworks that better reflects the world we live in today.
Mm-hmm.
So we're seeing a lot more around the integration of advanced technology, data-driven decision-making. There's a lot about sustainability really at the core of these management systems. Equally, it reflects the need for enhanced organizational resilience and really repositions, ISO and these management systems at the center of a lot of the sustainability discussion, which is a very different position to where it's been over the last 10 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you have anything on that, Stuart? What are you seeing from some of those changes coming in?
Yeah, I think it's more of a generic comment, really, which is just how these standards evolve over time. And we have to remember why they're there as well. What's the purpose behind these standards in the first place? And it's to get everyone to a minimum benchmark of quality of process and management systems. And good standards, when you get the vast majority of people to that level, need to then evolve and move on to the next level. So this is about bringing everyone now on another step forward in the journey of quality, of management, of assurance. And as Kevin said, reacting to and adapting to the ever-changing world around them. So, this is something that will continue to happen, maybe more frequently, maybe as frequently, we don't know. Yeah, it all depends very much on how quickly the world evolves and the requirements of the individual customers and companies around the world that are using the standards evolve. But this is a normal process that people should understand, that once we get to base, it's time to kick on to the next base, and that's exactly what's happening here.
Absolutely. It seems to me that some of them are almost a little more externally focused. It's for the benefit of the business. It's almost like, how is it going to help the overall world by adopting these standards? I see that a little bit more, at least from an American point of view. Would you agree?
I look at it a little differently, X. The way I look at it is that a lot of what may previously have been a line of thinking, such as what you've just shared, has kind of matured to the point where it's now about actually how these can be integrated into core business and facilitate the transformation and evolution of business. So it's not about externalities, it's more about the implications and impacts of that on the companies themselves, and therefore how the companies should adapt in order to stay strong, resilient, and profitable, and the financial impacts that might then lead to down the line for companies, investors, regulators, stakeholders. So I think it's really about internalizing a lot of that into core business practices to better prepare businesses, make them more resilient to really what we're seeing happening in the world today.
That's a great take. Now let's move on to 9001. I'm going to start with Kevin again on this. What stage are we at in 9001 update?
So the first draft of this 9001 update, I think, was actually completed in April 2024, and a second draft kind of went through and is under review as of early 2025. So we're in the late development stage, working towards a draft international standards, the DIS stage. Hopefully, we'll get to the point of a DIS end Q3, maybe early Q4, depending on timing.
Okay.
So a little bit behind ISO 14001, but also really on track for significant change over the course of the next 6 to 9 months.
Okay, great. Could you give me a really high level of maybe what some of those changes may be?
Yeah, we're looking at increasing emphasis on things like data and digitalization and readiness. So again, AI, IoT, big data analytics, using that to support quality management. Secondly, we're looking at more about risk management, systems thinking, risk-based thinking, potentially also increased emphasis on ethics and integrity. I think this is a really key part of what we could see in the updated 9001. So embedding ethics and integrity in leadership practices, in governance practices to support and really reaffirm trustworthy management systems, particularly on quality. That's a central theme. More on supply chain management. And I hear there may also be a bit more around flexibility for SMEs, although obviously, not sure what that will look like when we're still waiting for the draft standard, but that would also be quite an interesting addition.
Okay. So with some of the shift that you were talking about, are we moving from more of a quality control to a quality confidence landscape, perhaps?
I mean, I like that terminology. I like that. Quality confidence, moving from control to confidence. I mean, I think so. Yeah, we're definitely looking at something that goes from reactive to proactive. So beyond just, things like defect detection to building proactive systems that will ensure consistent quality outcomes. So reactive to proactive, equally moving from maybe trust through to transparency. So less about trust me and more about like transparency and evidence of exactly why that should be the case. Building more confidence amongst customers, regulators, and partners. More around, risk management, also really a central part of confidence, right? Showing that you've got strong, robust risk management protocols in place and you've applied deeper risk-based thinking to anticipate, right, what might be coming down the line. This is important. More adaptable, so more agile, and also kind of more value adding, more strategic in that sense. Definitely yes, I think is the short answer.
There you go. Again, we see that the evolution, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the 2015 standard brought in risk-based approach into 9001. Now this is okay, it should be more mature.
Right.
What are next steps? What are next steps? Yeah.
Exactly.
Stuart, why does it matter now?
We've talked there about anticipating what's coming down the line. And I think that's one of the key drivers here is that the changes matter because we've got that complexity in global supply chains. We've seen that. If I give you a real working example, when I started in this industry, in the food sector, getting a product from concept to shelf was somewhere in the region of 16 weeks, It's 16 days now, and sometimes even less.
Yeah.
And that's a phenomenal shift. And that's down to the ability to have that complexity in supply chain, which brings its own risks. And I think one of the points that Kevin was talking about around that trust, that assurance, but also the adaptability of a business. This is also about showing that a business is able to adapt to that ever-changing landscape, which is changing daily, as we know. You pick up newspaper or whatever device you use in the morning, there's another piece of news about something that's changed overnight, or more legislation, or sadly there's some sort of conflict going on somewhere, which means that businesses have to adapt and change and be very adaptable. So that anticipation. So I think complexity, adaptability, and resilience to change, and therefore you need that backbone of kind of confidence that you can do that. And last but certainly not least, and we've touched on this, is that whole technological disruption. We've got AI now coming into our everyday lives, regardless of what you do and where you are. It's becoming more and more part of how we interact with each other, with businesses, and even think in our own lives now. So again, we have to be able to show resilience as a business against all of these changes. And I read somewhere, and forgive me for not knowing the source, but we're seeing in 2 years the shift that we used to see in 200 years in
Hmm.
terms of advancement in technology. And that will only get faster,
Yeah,
you know.
it's exponential.
So imagine in 5 or 6 years' time, we will be seeing in 20 days what we're seeing in 2 years now. And therefore, that resilience, that adaptability, and that being able to be anticipating what's coming down the line and be ready for it is why it matters.
Yeah. Companies do really need to be agile. That's absolutely for certain now in this day and age. Well, you touched on them and you used the term risk. What are some of the risks and the opportunities? Stuart, could you give us some of those?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be very generic here. I think there are obviously compliance risks with the slow adopters, and when standards come out, companies are given a period of time to actually then become ready and go through the process of being certificated to the new version of the standard. And
Hmm.
a lot of companies will push that to the back and will leave it to the last minute, and that's a risk actually, because if we go back through the whole of this podcast, we've been speaking about resilience, adaptability, fit for purpose, being ready to anticipate risks. And in essence, there is a risk here of not doing it early because you're not fit for purpose. You're not ready to go. You're in a fast changing world that you're waiting and kind of, leaving it to the end. So I think in actual fact, to turn this on its head, there's probably some competitive advantage for the early movers because they are in the right shape to be more resilient, to be more adaptable, to comply with the requirements around the world. So I think that's kind of key for me. And I don't like the phrase box ticking, but I think we started with it. But let's not forget the whole purpose of this standard was to put an initial robust framework in place that would give confidence in a business that they were buying from or using. And we're moving from that kind of check, it's done, into a more strategic tool to make sure that businesses can pivot and can adapt and can deploy very quickly with a confidence in the backbone of their 9001 quality management system, of their everything they do has that backbone written and stamped right through it. So to me, there is very much a competitive advantage here in being an early adopter. 3 years is an awful long time in the world right now.
Hmm.
So why would you wait 3 years to get up to speed with what's going on? That would be my challenge to every business that listens to this podcast. Get ahead of it, learn fast, be agile, and be robust.
Hmm.
That's awesome. Just really interesting point. Do you think some of those changes with the agility may have come from the pandemic and seeing the need that the pandemic taught us you've got to be agile or it could be the end. You have to be able to make changes.
I think it's a good point. I saw a lot of change in the world with the pandemic. I saw a lot of businesses that got caught like literally with the pants down, and that's not the best phrase for a podcast, but that's exactly what happened. They were very reliant on outdated modes of verification, of assuring their own suppliers, etc. Audit ruled everything. And I think what it did do, thankfully, in my view, with all of the issues that the pandemic brought, what it did do was it made businesses have to rely much more on the use of data, the use of predictive models, and the use of insight and analytics to drive decision making, because they couldn't rely on boots on the ground and have this rear view mirror view to life, which they'd had for the last 10, 15 years. So, I think what it has done is it's been a bit of a paradigm shift in how we think and how we look at things. And the leaders that we're working with are all very heavily adopted into the use of data in the right way to drive risk models, prioritization, predictive kind of futures and early interventions. Let's not deal with an issue. Let's get ahead of the issue and actually head it off at the pass. And we see, some of the real leaders in business are absolutely adopting that and embracing that. Kevin, you might have a different view or maybe similar.
I mean, overall, I would agree with all of those points, but what I'd also say maybe is something a bit deeper. The pandemic forced a wave of change that would never have otherwise happened. People
Hmm.
as beings are kind of naturally comfortable in safe, recurring patterns that they know and understand. And
Yeah.
the pandemic forced a fundamental change that no one wanted to go through, but that they had to.
Yeah.
And, maybe that was like the phase one, and we're now in the phase two.
Yeah.
And having gone through the phase one, we are more capable of responding to what we now need to navigate, which is potentially a even bigger exponential crisis that is AI and everything that comes with
Yeah.
that, let
Yeah.
alone the politics. And would we have even been thinking like this if we hadn't had the pandemic? I think it's a really good challenge. Potentially not, but certainly we need to be thinking like this today. So
Yeah.
everything happens for a reason.
Right. Awesome. Well, starting to wrap up here, we're seeing a lot of change in these ISO standards. And from our conversation, seems to be pretty positive from an overall view. Are we seeing them finally catch up to the sustainability conversation? And you both can have, I'd love for both of you to give us a little talk about that.
Yes, no problem. I think the answer is yes, and it's accelerating. Really keen and pleased to see these standards evolving. For years, skeptics, if I was being provocative, have criticized many of these standards for being too slow,
Mm,
too bureaucratic, and too focused on paperwork, not enough on action and real world impact.
hmm
We've seen companies that have developed and implemented their own protocols, policies, and procedures, and many other initiatives that have come into being since these standards were first conceived. And they've taken so many more impact steps than these standards have in the past. So, provocatively, these standards have just moved far too slowly up until now. I say up until now because these latest revisions aren't just catching up. They are really throwing down the gauntlet, actually, for business. And they're challenging business at exactly the right time when
yeah.
businesses
Yeah.
need to be challenged because the world is confusing, complicated, and it's important to transition from the space of risk to one of opportunity into one that enables you to be resilient. These standards say very clearly that this compliance era is over and the age of visible, digitally enabled, and stakeholder driven accountability has begun.
That's a provocative take, but I like it. How about you, Stuart? Now, you want to follow that one up?
How can I follow the provocative statement of
Yeah.
Kevin? We've talked briefly about it, and there's no point going over the ground. But I think one of the common mistakes that standards sometimes make when they go through a revision process is they use it to catch up with the world that's changed around them. I think this change is actually more about future-proofing businesses, making them more resilient, and future-proofing the standards as a result of that. So I fully agree with the provocative statement.
Awesome. Awesome. Are there any changes that might happen that we want to keep our eye on?
I think for me, a general takeaway is more harmonization in structure, more integration with sustainability frameworks, more recognition of technology and data driven, an increased focus on resilience, risk, future proofing, as Stuart said,
Mm-hmm.
and really kind of positioning businesses for this new landscape that we find ourselves in, being hyper agile, responsive, and preparing for not just growth, but also resilience.
So here we are, mid 2025. What should clients start to do today to avoid that rush when we hit 2026?
Yeah, it's a great question, X. To me, and I think we've kind of emphasized this point throughout this podcast, early engagement. Okay,
Mhm.
get ahead of this curve. This is not more of the same. This is a change that is coming that is going to help you and your business be ready for the future. So early engagement is something that I would 100% recommend to all of my clients. Education. Okay, we're all going through this change program together. We're learning more and more as we get to the various stages in terms of the releases and the adoptions and the sign-offs. So I think having that early engagement with an education program, do the
Mhm.
training, understand, engage with your provider, is absolutely critical. And perhaps this time more than ever, looking at that gap assessment, making sure you're ready, you're fit for purpose, having time to make sure that any gaps are actually addressed robustly and considered fully within your business before you actually get to the point of certification, I think will be absolutely critical.
So probably something Kevin would like to say is go to your chat GPT or Claude or whatever and type in what can I do to get focused on this and educate yourself. How can organizations future-proof their management systems rather than just chase every update that comes down?
I think actually these changes will help them do that. I'm quite positive that they will. And we've talked a lot. We've used very similar words throughout here: flexibility.
Mm-hmm.
And I think being flexible, having full alignment at leadership level, recognizing that the standards are not a necessary evil, but actually an essential backbone to your business and your future business decisions will really help. And yeah, again, Kevin's alluded to some of this in his comments around that's kind of system level thinking. One of the things that I would just throw in there is don't shy away from the adoption of data and that intelligence into your business thinking, and think about and consider how that fits in around everything you're doing within this management framework, because that's very much the future. And the thriving businesses will adopt and embrace. The surviving businesses will struggle, and there will be other businesses that decide not to do anything about it, and there will be consequential, kind of decisions that people will take at this point.
Kevin?
As a final thought, I would really challenge businesses listening to this to think about these updates as a huge opportunity. It's not about box ticking. It's about taking this as a time to reflect on your business, to evaluate whether it's positioned for the present and the future that we know is coming, and to systematically engineering that into the standard itself, but maybe more importantly, into the day-to-day business practice, which also means living, breathing, and implementing what is in the standard, not just preparing it, writing it, putting it on the shelf, but really making sure that it's an active part of your day-to-day business plan, strategy, and future proofing.
Awesome. It really is true. The more that a company doesn't just see this as a plaque on their wall that we've hit certification, the better it's going to affect your business. That's one of the reasons it's here.
Yeah, I would just say the risks are clear and present. The opportunities are here and now. So just do it.
Fabulous. Really appreciate you guys today. This has been a wonderful conversation. I love these kind of conversations when you can get a little bit of the details of what's changing, but see it as a whole picture and the evolution of ISO standards. Really appreciate you guys today.
Anytime.
And thank you for the coordination and the comparing. It's been greatly appreciated.
Absolutely. Thank you, X. Thanks, Stuart.
Yeah.
Thank you. We want to thank everyone who's listened to our podcast today. We hope that it has been informative for you. Now, if you're looking for more information about Core Business Solutions, now that we're an LRQA company, how we can help you with ISO certification, cybersecurity, or even customized training, please email us at info@thecoresolution.com. You can also visit our website at www.thecoresolution.com. If you haven't already followed us on your favorite podcast platform or YouTube, please be sure to do so, and that way you won't miss the next Quality Hub podcast when it's dropped next week. Have a great day.